And it was an historic night to wrap up a very unconventional Democratic convention. Joe Biden officially accepted the presidential nomination in a speech calling for unity, and then stepped outside for fireworks and honking cars in a socially distanced celebration. Our Jessica Smith is here with us now for more. And Jess, this was a pretty conventional speech from Joe Biden, given that it was an unconventional situation with the pandemic, taking on the current president, but he never actually said Trump by name, right?
It was still very clear who he was speaking about as he was giving this acceptance speech. He did accept the nomination in the same way that he announced his campaign, urging voters to join him to restore the soul of America. He says that the United States is currently facing 4 different crises: the coronavirus, economic downturn, the fight for racial justice, and climate change. He says as president, he would be able to tackle those problems. And contrasting himself with President Trump, he said if he were president, he would work to unite the country. Let's watch.
Here and now, I give you my word. If you entrust me with the presidency, I will draw on the best of us, not the worst. I will be an ally of the light, not the darkness. It's time for us, for we the people, to come together. And make no mistake, united, we can and will overcome this season of darkness in America. We'll choose hope over fear, facts over fiction, fairness over privilege.
Now, this was the biggest political speech of Biden's life, and it was a very strong performance. And we've seen President Trump in his campaign really try to paint Biden as someone who is in decline or someone who is not up to the task of being president, of course, calling him Sleepy Joe or Slow Joe. And I think last night's performance is going to make it very difficult to continue those attacks on him, Alexis.
So what's next for the campaign for Biden and for Kamala Harris? I guess no in-person rallies because of the pandemic.
Yeah, normally the candidates at this point would go off to big events in swing states, having rallies, shaking hands, all of that. But this time it's going to be virtual. Today they have a virtual fundraiser. And the campaign people I'm talking to seem to think that these virtual campaign events are working because it sends the message that they are following the science, they are following the health and safety guidelines as they continue to campaign the last, I think we're at 74 days now.
Yeah, that's it. It's getting closer. All right, Jess Smith, thank you. Let's talk more about the week that was at the DNC and what comes next with Ed Mills, Washington policy analyst at Raymond James. Ed, good to see you again. So what do you make of Joe Biden's performance, as Jess just put it last night? Is it going to be more difficult for the Trump campaign to refer to him as less than sharp and Sleepy Joe?
Well, I think last night it was a strong performance by Joe Biden. He is someone that is probably uniquely qualified to give a speech to an empty room. He spent more than 40 years in the United States Senate, where that is something that you do on a routine basis. It is interesting to see how low the expectations were set by the Trump campaign for Biden. And I think that is a potential threat to this Trump campaign going into the fall, especially as we head into the debates. The lower you set the expectations for your challenger, just kind of showing up sometimes allows you to exceed those expectations. But overall, last night, I think anyone who is watching this would say it was a strong speech. It hit a lot of kind of chords trying to move voters in the middle over to the Biden camp. We will see in the coming weeks whether or not that had an impact on voters. But all in all, kind of this unconventional convention is a net positive for the Biden campaign.
And not a lot of folks on Wall Street are talking about this, but perhaps they should be. How would a President Biden shape the Federal Reserve?
That's a great question, Brian. I do think that Governor Lyle Brennard, who is on the board right now, the one nominee that is left over from the Obama years, should be considered a front runner. And one of the things that I've watched over the last
front runner for Fed chief,
as Fed chief, and what we would see here is that most of the times coming out of the Federal Reserve, you have unanimous decisions on monetary policy and especially on regulatory policy. In the last couple of years, she has been the dissenting vote on the deregulatory agenda of the Donald Trump administration in the Federal Reserve. And she wants higher capital standards at banks. She wants tougher stress tests. She really does align herself with where Democrats are on a lot of these issues, and being on the board already, getting elevated in 2022 is something that I would be watching for.
Hey, Ed, I want to talk about what this convention focused on, because it seemed to critique Trump's handling of things like the pandemic, climate change, gun control by many different speakers. But did it do enough to answer the question for voters as to what will Biden mean for the economy, mean for Americans beyond simply ousting Trump?
It's a good question. I've always felt as if this, Alexis, if this campaign is a referendum on Trump, that is a benefit to the Biden campaign. If the Trump campaign is able to make it a choice between the two candidates, that is a positive for the Trump campaign. So what the Biden campaign was trying to do all this week was continue to make this a referendum on Trump and not really promise the world into the future. In very many, kind of segments, they portrayed Joe Biden as average Joe, and the campaign is not about kind of what he will do. It's more about a return to normal is the campaign that they are trying to kind of effectuate. And what they're hoping for is when you look at the right track, wrong track numbers in polling data, most Americans believe that the United States is on the wrong track. And so a return to normal is particularly attractive for a lot of Americans right now.
And Ed, two nuances that I do want to touch upon. Financial services tax, would Biden sign off on that? And pot banking, would Biden sign off on that?
Yeah, it's Brian, great questions. On a financial services tax, if we have another round of fiscal support for this economy in a potential Biden administration, and we start looking for pay-fors, the Congressional Budget Office estimates a financial transaction tax could raise about $770 billion over the course of 10 years. That's real money. And to the extent that Wall Street has done quite well in the response to this pandemic, having, kind of asking Wall Street to pay a little would be politically popular. And on pot banking, there's already been a bill that had a huge bipartisan vote out of the House of Representatives. The only thing that is holding that up is some Republican opposition in the Senate. If Democrats controlled the Senate and had a vote on that bill, I believe there would be bipartisan support. So one of the maybe highs out of the Democratic sweep could be a pot banking bill.
Ed, looking ahead to next week, it's the Republicans' turn. They're going to have their national convention. Most of it will be held virtually. Not as probably as much star power as the DNC had, but what are you expecting? And are there any particular speakers that you're looking forward to hearing from?
Yeah, so a lot of the Republican convention is going to be broadcast from the White House itself. That is an impressive backdrop to run a convention from. We will be looking to see kind of what the kind of mantra of the Trump campaign is. I do expect there to be a lot of kind of messaging on how good the economy was at the beginning of Trump's term, and that he kind of had a strong economy. He is going to bring that back, kind of almost pulling from a Biden line of Build Back Better. I will be looking to see kind of how many other congressional leaders are there. We got news last night that Mitch McConnell will not appear at the convention. That's unusual to not have the Senate Majority Leader, the Republican leader, at the convention. We're not going to have other former Republican presidents or nominees speak at the convention. So we'll be looking to see probably a convention that has a lot more average voices, average Americans. And I do think the swing factor in this election is getting that average Joe, average kind of middle class, white collar or blue collar worker to make a decision on who they are going to support. Who wins that group probably wins this election.
Well, a lot more political theater next week for sure. Ed Mills, Washington policy analyst at Raymond James. Thanks so much.
Hey investors, Zach Guzman here. Are you interested in learning more about the markets and getting the latest financial news? Well, then click right here to subscribe to our Yahoo Finance YouTube channel. Get the latest up-to-the-minute market analysis, big interviews in the world of finance, and information on how to manage your money every day wherever you are.